Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, back again with Doctor Who Classic. This time around, we are doing the Doctor Who TV movie from 1996. The, I suppose, failed attempt at a reboot, because I know that this is produced, it's a British and American production, and, you know, it's 1996, so it's I guess 10 years after the show already ended, and I think Fox co-produced this, and they were going to see can we bring back Doctor Who maybe in America, see if that works out, but I guess it didn't, because it pretty much Doctor Who went dormant again for another 10 years until we got around to the 9th Doctor. So I just realized that normally I say what we did last time on Doctor Who Classic. Last time we did watch Remembrance of the Daleks. Dad, what was that one about?
That one was good. The return of the Doctor back to literally the day that they left in 1963 with Ian and Barbara and Susan. Just some wonderful little Easter eggs in there. Had a great time with that one.
Yeah, it was it was kind of a surprise after those first two, because the first one we watched, Kinda, was... and...
We don't talk about Kinda anymore.
Yeah. And then the second one, Vengeance on Varos, we liked that one, and it was all right, but it wasn't spectacular, I suppose. And that one was definitely spectacular. It really felt like I was just watching a normal episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
4 times in the 80s, but still. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much all we can say. This is the last Classic Who video we're doing for quite some time, actually, until around when I get to about Series 6 of Doctor Who, around the midway or so, I think, is when we're going to be watching the 2 Peter Cushing films. And so that's going to be in the fall, maybe September or October. So,
okay.
So yeah, it is going to be a while. We're not going to be doing the whole in-between me watching 2 seasons thing anymore. So yeah, but after this, we will have now met all 8 of the original Doctors. So that's at least good. And we can go ahead and mention the weather, because this seems to be the running theme we have in these 4 episodes. Today is incredibly cold. Really, it's a high of, 44 today?
Yes. Wednesday, it was 90 degrees. I mean, it seriously reached up one of the highest temperatures in early April here in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And then the temperature has steadily decreased, and this morning it is raining, and again, probably a high, if we're lucky, in the low 40s.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And I mean, I'd prefer cold weather over hot weather any day. I think... I don't understand when people don't like winter. I'm like, no, cold weather is really nice. I do feel bad because it's raining all the time, because despite the fact that I like the rain, I know Darby doesn't like the rain. And
yes, he's we've had him for, about a year and a half now, coming up on 2 years, because it would be, I guess, in June, end of June when we got him 2 years ago. And our Beagle, he's not a house dog. He definitely loves our backyard. We have a nice large backyard.
Yeah.
But when it rains, he's got nothing to do. He walks out, gets his feet wet, and turns around, comes right back in.
Pretty much. And even if he does go out there, it means we have to wipe off his muddy feet. So, yeah. That's your weekly weather check that we apparently do.
Makes me wonder if this might be in part due to the fact that it was in the 90s when we started seeing new American channels and things that weren't necessarily on network. 89, you remember, if I recall correctly, was when they brought back Star Trek: The Next Generation. And, that began to lead to Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and then Enterprise. So maybe over in England they were catching on with this too. Just the idea of, hey, we had this really cool series way back when.
Yeah.
Maybe if we did a couple of TV movies or something and it would catch on, but apparently it didn't. So.
And from what I know, the reason they canceled Doctor Who at the height of, it was getting really great reviews and a really high budget, it's because that the people that ran the BBC at the time hated sci-fi, just all sci-fi, and thought it was demeaning to have sci-fi on the BBC. And So they were just like, yeah, we'll get rid of it, and I guess they were already getting like offers from American network to take Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that's just how this came about.
Also, if I recall correctly, wasn't it in either the late 90s or early 2000s that Fox did that first X-Men film? And when it really kind of took off, then I think, again, it showed that the old comic book and sci-fi stuff could actually find a market, that, that there was a group of people out there like us who loved that sort of stuff and said, hey, we certainly pay money, or we'd watch it again. So
yeah, because I mean, the comic book movies before that were, I mean, aside from like the Superman and Batman movies, like they were not that great. And then X-Men comes along, and then Spider-Man comes along. It's like, okay, yeah, we can do something with it. So yeah, maybe that played into it because of the sci-fi and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, maybe.
Now, who's in this?
Paul McGann plays the Doctor.
Okay, don't know that I know him from anything.
Maybe not. So yeah, with that all being said, yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into the movie if we've got nothing else to say.
That's fine.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's get going.
It was on the planet Skaro that my old enemy, the Master, was finally put on trial. They say he listened calmly as his list of evil crimes was read and sentence passed. It was a request they should never have granted.
Why was he tried on Skaro? That's the Dalek homeworld.
Symphonic Doctor Who. It's interesting, though. Eric Roberts. Fairly well-known American actor at that time.
Turn that down slightly.
Sylvester McCoy.
There. That should do it.
Oh, he hasn't regenerated yet.
In all my travels through space and time, and nearing the end of my 7th life, I was finally beginning to realize that you could never be too careful.
Wow, so this really establishes that the numbering we have is correct.
Interior looking very Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
I loved reading H.G. Wells when I was a kid. In fact, the first book I ever bought was First Men in the Moon. Bought it in England in 1965. Still have it, too.
It is interesting how drastically they changed the set of the TARDIS.
Yeah.
It's just... You just drive through the gate.
Yeah. That many bullets and he's still not hit.
Yeah. We really just walked into another movie. This is quite the power to be able to turn to goo after you die. Very lucky he knew the Doctor's very generic nickname. And you'd think he would have regenerated by now.
Yeah. Well, he's not dead yet.
Don't have anyone on staff at midnight?
Well, doctors are on call.
Yes.
He's under. Timing malfunction. The master. He's out.
I was gonna say, he should be able to resist that to an extent.
Scalpel?
I wonder if them poking around in him is actually why he regenerates.
Been there, done that.
I know. That's a nice quiet place where he can regenerate. Still, should have happened by now.
Yeah. Master's a cobra.
They're establishing a lot of powers the Masters never had, I don't think. I mean, last time we saw him was in the 70s. All he could do was hypnosis.
It's alive.
Well,
It's alive.
I did a reaction to Frankenstein in October.
Yeah.
Little plug there. Also not... It's not the general, like, regeneration sequence they've used.
Yeah.
Stronger than I thought he was.
Where is he?
The abandoned wing, I guess. Why is there an abandoned wing?
Nice bit.
Body snatchers. Please report to administration.
Does he usually take this long to recover?
Can you give me some time?
Well, it is a process, but it... He seems to have really lost himself.
Wonder if that's an effect of the shooting rather than just a regular regeneration.
Yeah.
But you have to help me try!
You'd think they would take that out if they're sending him to the morgue.
The last thing that they took out of me were the two little drainage tubes. That was very weird.
Who are you?
I was dead too long this time. The anesthetic almost destroyed the regenerative process.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. I guess. So I guess after this he'll change the locks.
I always wondered why the TARDIS didn't have an AI. You know, someone that would talk to him.
Yeah.
Who's there?
Well, how'd he get in?
The guy from the ambulance?
Look in the beam of light. If the TARDIS really likes you, the eye will open.
Why don't you look?
You pull the staff from the stone.
Why doesn't the TARDIS just not do that? It has to. The TARDIS has to know that's not the Doctor.
I know who I am!
But the first time the Doctors had a romantic relationship.
Who's the guy I took at the hospital? The doctor's past life.
I mean, I suppose technically, but
That's what he calls himself. Doctor.
Now, was Susan his actual granddaughter? Did he have children who had children?
yeah, he did have an actual family.
And you done this.
Yes.
You see, already the molecular structure of the planet is changing.
Guess that's why he never opens it, and why we never see that far into the TARDIS.
Excuse me.
Ew.
Ugh.
because he's a reptile and he can't stand cold?
Sure. I'm sure we've missed a lot with the Master. I don't know why. I never expected the 8th Doctor to be the action-packed Doctor.
A lot of visuals here reminiscent of the Terminator.
Yeah.
And I also heard a couple of echoes of Back to the Future in there. So, this makes perfect sense if they're building off of that kind of momentum from those films of the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
You'll get your body back soon, and then we're a team, right?
Yes, we're a team.
His performance is very, hit and miss, where it's sometimes, he's very weird, and sometimes, that, it does work.
Dr. Grace Holloway and guest. Hello. Happy New Year.
I have to say, this is done very much like a TV movie. I mean, you can tell exactly where they were breaking for commercials.
Yeah, that's true.
From London, they're waiting.
I will say it's weird how little British accents there are in this. It's just him, not even the Master has that.
Yeah. Well, Eric Roberts is, if I recall correctly, a New York actor, and he's doing very well because a lot of his films, you can tell he's from New York, because he got that real kind of thick accent.
Yeah. That even kind of looks like the column in the middle of the
Only the
TARDIS.
tiniest part of it. I'm half human. On my mother's side.
It was a very clever way of just taking it. I thought it was yes, I do have a secret. Let's talk over there. Bam. And knock him out.
The universe hangs by such a delicate thread of coincidences, it's useless to meddle with it, unless like me you're a Time Lord.
Right. So just give me a few pointers.
How does he know everyone's specific?
Yeah. It's just nice to see that there's some humor in it.
Yeah.
When he gets his body back from you, I'm gonna be rich.
You believe it?
Why shouldn't I?
I suppose he neglected to mention that there won't be any
should
place
you?
left to spend your money.
That's a tad kinky.
I always
Doctor Strange.
for the occasion.
I think
Well,
that's
glad to see that
traditional
you're aware of the
Time
gravity of
Lord
the situation.
garb.
I never liked this.
Oh, that finally explains why he's got the Victorian costume. It was party time. It was a costume party for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, because I was wondering, who's the really fancy guy at the hospital?
Unless I'm mistaken, in her present state of mind, that won't work. Her eyes aren't human anymore. Hurry!
Seems like you shouldn't install something that requires a different species' DNA to open.
It's very reminiscent of Ghostbusters 2. The guy trying to come in at midnight.
Yeah.
I thought surgery was different.
How does she know what she's doing?
Humanian.
Finally, someone got kicked. Yeesh.
I don't think I could live through that again.
I definitely wouldn't live through that again.
Reason enough.
I do like that the controls are a lot more simple.
definitely low tech.
Yeah. I mean, Tennant does that all the time. He has specific mallets to hit it.
Come with me.
You come with me.
Me come with you.
Yes.
Me come with you. It's tempting.
Where was I?
He was trying to read a book when all this went down.
Oh no, not again.
Okay. I don't think there's anything else at the end.
Hang on. Yeah, William Sasso, that was the guy.
Whew. Man, is it over already? Alright. Alright. That was really good.
Yeah. Now, I can understand why Doctor Who purists might find it not, but
Yeah.
you have to understand, perhaps they did this because, again, they needed to evolve it. If they were really trying to get this for an American audience, the standard Doctor Who, very dry wit and all that sort of stuff might not have played. So
Yeah.
they were again cashing in on, I mean, if nothing else, the visuals of the Ghostbusters, the visuals of the Terminator,
Yeah.
a bunch of other stuff. And so I think an American audience, if that got any kind of widespread release, would have really enjoyed that. Again,
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember it. I don't remember it ever coming to the United States. I don't remember where it, if it
Yeah, I
showed
don't-
on TV, where was it?
I don't know where it would have showed. Let's see, this was 96. So, yeah, I don't know. You would think that you'd see something about that, but I guess that's the thing is that, if it is, because it's British and American produced, maybe, who knows, maybe they aired it on the BBC first and it didn't go over well. I don't know. That seems like I can understand. Yes, it does. It was different from the preceding show, but this honestly, this feels like the show I'm watching.
Yeah.
Like this definitely, and he maybe more than any other Doctor we saw has the energy that Eccleston has and that Tennant has. So I could definitely see this if they went on into a show. I could see how it would work, and I could see how it would appeal to an American audience.
I do understand if they were thinking of trying to bring this back as a series, it would have to be an hour long because, I mean, that's too much stuff to put into a half hour. But again, a lot of this stuff that was coming back at this time was not on network TV. Syndication is where this stuff popped up. Next Generation and all those Star Trek things, all this stuff was really in syndication. You had to kind of bank on local stations picking it up. I mean, our local station here in Oklahoma City picked up Next Generation, but it aired at 10:30 on Sunday night.
Ugh.
So Mom and I had to stay up till 11:30 every Sunday to watch it because unless we could, DVR it. Of course, back then it was still videotaped, VCR it. So and we sometimes did that. But yeah, if that was in syndication for somewhere, we probably never would have seen it because never would have heard any publicity about it.
Well, it's also interesting because if a new studio is coming in and they're like, okay, we have this. I guess at this point this would be around a 30-year-old, maybe more than that. Let's see. So 63. This is in 96. So it's over 40 years. No, 30 years.
30 years. Yeah.
It's over 30 years old at this point. And so we're taking this 30-year-old sci-fi show with 26 seasons prior, and we're going to try to bring it to a new audience, maybe in America or just people that have never seen it, whether in the United States or Britain. They do keep a decent continuity with the previous show. Now, obviously, they completely redid the TARDIS set.
Yeah.
With really the only thing that's even remotely like the old TARDIS set is the control panel in the center with the column, and that's it. And then the general, they kept the sounds of the TARDIS, and they kept that it's a police box still.
Yeah.
But other than that, the entire TARDIS set is updated to look completely different. And we go in, we see different parts of the TARDIS now. But they keep it... This movie does sort of rely on you knowing a little bit about Doctor Who.
Yeah.
It opens up on Skaro. We know what Skaro is. We know that's the Dalek home planet. Why the Master was being tried there, we're not sure. But we know what Skaro is. We know who the Master is. And we know who the Doctor is. And we understand, Time Lords and stuff like that. But I'm wondering if you were in the 90s and you'd never seen anything of Doctor Who, could you follow this necessarily? Now, the basic plot of it, there's this guy, he's an alien, he's with this girl named Grace, and they're going after this evil guy in shades. Okay, that you can follow, but all the stuff about being a Time Lord, being on Skaro, we start with a different main actor. First of all, we start with Sylvester McCoy, who then changes into Paul McGann, maybe 20 minutes into it, probably. It does take a while. I actually thought that, because I knew Sylvester McCoy would be in this, I thought that what it was is that, the TARDIS just appears, and then he just walks out. This is the only thing you ever see of McCoy. He walks out, he gets shot, and then he regenerates. But they kept him in for a decent amount of time, longer than I thought, and they even explained why they dragged out his regeneration through the anesthesia and everything.
Yeah.
And so, there's definitely a level of continuity where it's maybe if this movie came with pamphlets for all the new viewers, here's the basics you need to know.
Yeah.
It's what's Skaro? Skaro's the planet of the Daleks. What are the Daleks? They're these weird pepper pot aliens that, the Doctor always fights. Okay, got it. And they were doing a trial for the Master. Who's the Master? It's okay, he's this rival Time Lord. What's a Time Lord? A Time Lord is there's a lot in here. So that's the thing. It's they could have easily scrapped a lot of that stuff. It's interesting that they kept it. They didn't create a brand new villain for this. They just reused the Master basically.
Yeah. And
even evolved the Master's character a little bit by the fact that, they say okay, Time Lords have 13 lives, which is crap, but because if that's the case, then that would mean that Jodie Whittaker's the last Doctor, which I don't think is happening.
Yeah.
So there must be some way around that. So the Master used up all of his lives, and it's okay, that's it. He's dead. He's done. No more regenerations for him. Somehow he becomes this little snake thing, and then possesses this Bruce guy, and it's how did he do that? It's that at least is something new. It's as far as I know, that's something new. I don't think, they did use a lot of his hypnosis powers in this, which is good because that is one of the things that the Master is known for, is his hypnosis, and he used that in his first appearance that we saw. So I like that. And then the fact that they add on a few more powers to him, it does make sense because they're trying to make him, even though, yes, he's the Doctor's rival, it makes sense to make him even more powerful. It's this is, the 20th time he's faced the Doctor, that you need something new there. But still, that continuity there that brought in, because they could have just completely rebooted this and just been this is a new beginning for Doctor Who. This is his first life, and he'll regenerate some other time.
Yeah.
So
I really kind of felt that this was the whole movie was literally a regeneration of the series. There, you get some echoes of the past, but then it comes out with a completely new Doctor who has a completely different outlook and a different way of doing things. So I thought again, for me, it was very effective.
Yeah.
Now, again, like you said, if I had never seen it before, does it work as a standalone? But I think it even does that because there's enough exposition with Sylvester McCoy, and then throughout the rest where they drop hints where you could have put that together. You wouldn't have necessarily needed to know anything about the previous series.
Right, and that's the whole point of having a companion, is because the Doctor's companion is the audience's way of like learning all this. If it was just him, you wouldn't know what's going on because he would never have to explain it. But the fact is now he does have to explain it to someone, and the fact is he gets a new companion. He gets Grace. He doesn't have anyone else from the classic series, so he has to re-explain all this. Like, okay, I have 2 hearts, which they really focused on a lot. It was like, yes, I have 2 hearts. I can regenerate into a new body. This is he says that McCoy was his 7th life. So I guess now, because this is still canon, I know there's some people that say that this isn't canon, but it is. There's just no doubt about it. That means that from the beginning of Doctor Who, that is exactly how we've been watching it. Is Hartnell was his first life, and his first life lasted, maybe 450 years, and then he regenerated into Patrick Troughton, and that's his second life. Which is interesting. I always kind of thought, like, when I, think about it, it's like, okay, Tennant, he's the 10th Doctor, and, we have this whole line of regenerations, but they've never referred to his different numbered regenerations until now. At least, I don't know if in the classic series they did do that, but yeah, it just seems interesting because you could kind of think like, well, that's just the numbering that, the fans or the BBC gives to keep them all straight, but that's not necessarily the exact line, that's not the exact numbering that the Doctor actually has in his continuity. So, were there regenerations before Hartnell? At least according to this movie, there aren't. So, I found that to be interesting.
Be honest, I keep hearing about this thing, the Adventure of the 5 Doctors. That would be, to me, that sounds like a fun sort of thing to watch, because obviously if he gets to see his previous incarnations, that sounds like there's a whole bunch of stuff that could happen there.
I do know the 5 Doctors is just the first 5 from Hartnell all the way to Peter Davison. And I know that we'll be watching that around the time that I get to the 50th anniversary, so that's going to be like early next year-ish, so it'll be a while, but I think there's actually one before that called The 3 Doctors, which is Hartnell, Troughton, and John Pertwee at that point. And it does make me interested because, like, how do they fit in William Hartnell into those? The whole reason he left was failing health, and eventually he died. So it's like, how did they just have footage of him? Is this like a Carrie Fisher in Star Wars thing?
No, my understanding was they found an actor who looked a lot like him and used that as a sub.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's see. What all of these have we talked about? Scarrow, that was just weird. Why is he being tried on Scarrow and the Doctor was there? Honestly, I'd like to see that adventure. Like, I wonder if there's, like, a book or a comic or an audio drama where it's, like, it's a prequel to this movie about how the Master was on trial on Scarrow, executed by the Daleks, and the Daleks gave his remains to the Doctor to take back to Gallifrey. So that's interesting. The 13 Lives, I still don't... I don't know. I feel like they did that to have a reason. It's like, yes, this is the last of the Masters, and then he comes back, obviously. But it's like, but eventually that has to affect the Doctor, because he says like, oh, I was on my 7th life, and then he regenerates, so this is his 8th life. So it's like, all right, buddy, you're getting up there in age. Then right now I'm on 10. I'm pretty sure I'm about to cross over into 11. So it's like, yeah, I hope they have an explanation for that sometime. I wrote down the Master. It is still interesting that they brought him back. It makes sense to have him be the villain, because you could say it's like, well, the Master is you could argue that he's maybe the biggest villain of Doctor Who, even though technically it's probably the Daleks that would be, and they would probably be the most recognizable in this film. But I think it works better to have the Master, because if you do the Daleks, it might be a little too much if we're trying to do a sort of a reboot. It's like, okay, or a refresh, basically. It's like, all right, we're doing this for a new audience in America. It's like, how about we get the guy that looks human, and it's like, we understand him, he's just, the rival, So I understand why it's that instead of the Daleks or the Cybermen or something. That may be a little too sci-fi coming out the gate.
And again, translating the Daleks from the 60s and even the 70s and 80s to what people were used to with the advent of Star Wars and Star Trek and all the rest of that, where we had really, like the Borg and all those other kind of mechanical things. The Daleks would look kind of clunky.
Yeah.
So, even the Cybermen.
Yeah, the Cybermen, you could probably get away with the Cybermen, and maybe if you do like a couple redesigns, because the Cybermen have gone through several redesigns. It's the Daleks that have pretty much remained consistently, the way they are. And it's like, the Cybermen at least is like, okay, they're Cybermen. They are robots. So that's a bit more relatable. Instead, if you have the Daleks, it's like, okay, if you don't know anything about the Daleks, like, they do look weird. They've got the eye stalk, they've got the little blaster, and that's fine. Then they've got, the plunger, and it's like, that could be hard to get across.
Yeah.
Like, it worked in the 60s, and everyone loved it, so they can keep using it even up to today. But it's a little hard to get across for a new audience, basically.
I have to say, there weren't a whole lot of special effects, but they were effective. I got to say, I didn't care for the whatever it is, psychic cobra or psychic snake that Eric Roberts swallowed there. Too many flashbacks to Kinda and the really horrible CGI snake or whatever that was.
The puppet snake.
Puppet snake, yeah.
See, and we do have, maybe sometime I'll show you, like after this recording, I'll show you the updated version where they actually did a good CGI snake over that. So, not too many special effects, which is interesting, and maybe again that's sort of the like way to ease people back into the sci-fi of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I will say his regeneration was different. His regeneration, I think, is actually more along the lines of when Hartnell turns into Patrick Troughton. It's just sort of almost like a fade transition. Now, when they transitioned from McCoy into McGann, like, it was a bit different. Like, you could see they added some more special effects. It wasn't just a clear switch. But I think at this point they had already established on the show the light show, basically, that happens when the Doctor regenerates, like, out of his hands and out of his head. Just this, it almost looks like fire just shoots out. And just there, you can kind of see the transition happen, and then it stops, and he's the new actor. But they didn't do that here. Instead, they just went with the transition and the Frankenstein homage.
Yeah.
Which was cool. I did like that.
Yeah.
And, it's an interesting way of looking at the regeneration like that. Yeah. So, it's also interesting that the surgery causes the regeneration. And now it almost stops it, but it's like, when they got all the bullets out, he was fine, and he wasn't flatlining or anything. So it's interesting that just because he was, at that point, he was still out from the wound, he wasn't able to just get up and get out, and then, McCoy would be the doctor of this one. It's specifically these circumstances where they realize he has two hearts, and they want to find out, and all of what they're trying to do to look at these two hearts causes his regeneration. So that's definitely interesting. It's like an involuntary, like he never really understands, or he can never really comprehend what's happening until he wakes up as the Eighth Doctor, and he's like, oh, something happened to me. And he's like, okay, well, he said he almost died. The anesthesia almost, fully stopped his regeneration. He would have just died. So that's interesting that it's like they almost shoehorned in an explanation for why he regenerated. Yeah. But you could have had more reasons that he regenerated. Like honestly, a gunshot wound, like he said, it hit him in the shoulder and it hit him in the leg. It's like, if you just have it hit him in the chest, he will regenerate. But that kept McCoy around for a couple more minutes. So Do you think he wished he could have kept going as the Doctor of the movie? Because it's like, yeah, it's been 10 years since I got canceled, and it's like and he probably loved being the Doctor. So it's interesting that they just brought him back just to have him regenerate.
Yeah.
And especially because you could argue it's like, well, they want to show each Doctor's regeneration, and it's like, but they never show Paul McGann's regeneration into Christopher Eccleston. Christopher Eccleston just shows up at the beginning of the new show and just is the Doctor. He's already regenerated, so
yeah.
And so you don't know. He could have regenerated, multiple times between those two, and we just don't know.
The whole thing about McCoy, though, may have been like Hartnell. It was 10 years later, and I'll be honest with you, things that I could do in my 40s. I did a show in my 40s, and they asked me to do a revival of it about 14, 15 years later. It was so much harder the second time around just because I was older.
That's true.
And so it just may have been that McCoy didn't want to. I mean, let's face it, they did some pretty stunt work.
Yeah.
And I realize there's probably a lot of stunt doubles and things, but there was some very physical action in this show.
Yeah.
And so getting a younger man to do that was probably just something that was expedient, something they thought would be a better idea.
Because he definitely is a return to the younger Doctor. And we've really only seen that with 5 and 6. Davison and Colin Baker, they were considerably younger than the others, and the only one maybe close to their age would be Tom Baker, but even he was still kind of older. So it was definitely a return to like, okay, we're going to have a younger Doctor, and he's going to be the more, like I said, the action-packed Doctor. So, yeah, that was interesting. Making sure we're still going. It's interesting that he kind of had memory loss for a while, which I guess they did explain as part of the anesthesia, and you were even saying, it's like, does he normally take this long to recover? And it's like, not exactly. Now, I know when Eccleston regenerated into Tenet, it did take him a while. Like, he regenerated, he was up, he was active, but then there was still some residual stuff. He hadn't finished the cycle yet, so he was out for like most of the next episode until he finally was able to recover. But this was different. He just did not know who he was for a while, and he kept seeing all these clues. He saw the time, and he was like, Time Lord, got it, okay. And then he sees doctors and stuff like that. It's like, Doctor, I'm the Doctor. And so it's interesting, but I guess part of that is just the anesthesia.
Well, also, again, you want to talk about flashbacks or references or homage. There was a very popular time travel series on NBC during the 90s called Quantum Leap. Yeah. And every time the guy, Sam Beckett, if I recall was his name, every time he would leap into a new time period and a new body, they had what they called, his memory was Swiss cheesed. And he had bits and pieces, flashes of what he had done, but it always took him, the first 10 minutes of each episode to figure out, oh, wait a minute, yes, I'm Dr. Beckett, and I've made the leap, and now I've got to figure out where I am. And sometimes, of course, the premise there was, although he could leap within his own lifetime, he would leap into different people's bodies, and sometimes he would even leap into a female body. Now, you could still see him. We saw him, the audience on TV saw him as Sam Beckett, as the Doctor, but when other people saw him and when he looked in a mirror, he always saw the face of the other person, whether it was a female or somebody who was a different race, or going from the guy who played Jonathan Archer on
Scott Bakula?
Bakula was Dr. Beckett. And sometimes he'd be tall and sometimes he'd be short, and it was always kind of fun when he realized, I still feel like who I am, but I'm now in the body of a 5-foot Asian man, or I'm a musical comedy actress sort of thing. So, but that Swiss cheese thing was kind of vaguely reminiscent of what happened here.
Yeah, and the Doctor always takes time to figure out his new body, because with each one he pretty much gets a new personality. Yeah. And so he has to figure out who he is mentally now, and he has to realize, how does this body work? He has to get used to it, basically. Yeah. And there was a mini episode when the Doctor became David Tennant, and he just sort of took him in and was like, okay, let me figure out everything. And he was like, okay, I have hair, I've got sideburns. And he's like, okay, I'm thinner, that's weird. And he's like, new teeth, that's really weird, but I'll get used to that. So he does have to take a little while to, kind of like the shoes, honestly. Yeah. He has to get used to it, basically.
Yeah.
So, I wrote down Lee and Grace. Interesting sort of characters. It was kind of interesting, when the Master was like, of course he should follow me because before me he had nothing, and it's like, it's kind of right. He was getting shot at for no reason. Or for some reason.
Yeah, I'm sure it was gang, some kind of gang related.
Yeah,
thing.
It's like, I mean, it's not good to go with the Master, but it didn't have a great life to begin with. Like, honestly, it would make sense to go with the Doctor. That's kind of where I thought they were going at the end, even though I was kind of thinking, like, should you really take this guy? It's like, he's been working for the Master, but he didn't know any better, and it's like he was tricked. Yeah. And it's like, well, he could make an interesting companion. He would make sense sort of along the lines of, previous companions, maybe like even Ace to an extent. Like, okay, here's this, young teenager that will go, this misguided teenager. I don't know if Ace was misguided, but it's like
street smart.
Street smart teenager that will go with the Doctor and they'll get their life in order. Yeah. So, and then Grace definitely felt like a normal companion. I don't know. It's like there's not too much to really say about her because like she just felt like the average sort of companion, but she did really help him out through that whole, recovering his memory and everything. So that was at least good. And it's also interesting because at this point when they made this, they were probably thinking, okay, we're going to make this, should be okay. Hopefully it'll get through and we make a series. But neither of them went with the Doctor at the end.
Yeah.
So if they did go into a series, we would have to bring in another companion, which is interesting.
Or he could go back and get them. Now, I will also say this. And again, this would have been, I don't know if it was late 70s, but definitely during the 80s and the 90s. Rather than make a standard TV series, one episode a week for 24 to 26 weeks, they would sometimes do, we will do a TV movie like once every 4 months or once every 6 months. So you'd stay familiar with the characters, but it wasn't on a weekly basis like that.
Right.
There were some what they called anthology series. I remember there were a couple of Western series like that in the 60s, and then it evolved into detective series, where each week you'd have a different detective series, and like every fourth week you'd come back to the original one.
Yeah.
And then some of those got spun off into their own weekly series, but the idea behind that was you got to save money because you weren't having to do one specific show about a specific detective over and over and over again, and it just kind of and sometimes they had crossovers and things like that. But I remember I can't remember if this, but like Columbo and Heart to Heart and some of those others I think might have started in this kind of anthology series before breaking it out on their own.
Well, and that kind of works with right now where I am in Doctor Who is I'm in 2009, and after 2000, pretty much since the show started for me, it's just been season after season. But now we're actually sort of taking a little break from having a season, and I'm just watching the specials. Like we had a Christmas special. I think the next one is going to be like a special episode at Easter, and then there's one in the fall, and then we come back around to Christmas and then New Year's, and then we start the actual proper Series 5. So I guess it could sort of be like that, is that every 4 months or so we have a decently lengthy and extensive episode of Doctor Who, and that's pretty much it. And at that point you may not even need a companion. Like maybe he could get a companion for each one, because that is sort of the same thing here, or with new Doctor Who right now, is that we had a Christmas episode and he got a new companion. And then at the end, he left that companion, and he's like, "All right, you're a one-off character, and I'm gonna move on." And I assume that that's gonna be the same thing. And they've done that before with the specials, like in the special before Series 3, they had they had a companion, and then she wasn't in Series 3. They did the same thing before Series 4. So they could do that if they didn't want to keep, sort of an overarching companion, or at least, for a couple seasons. They could just do that and probably have more budget to throw in for, special effects and stuff if they kept it to, a TV movie or something every 4 months and be along the lines of this.
Yeah.
So, and that would be different because, we're talking about it in terms of where I am now in Doctor Who, but prior to this was, a serialized show, which is very different. Like, we'll have a story, but it's going to take 4, 6, 7 episodes, and then it leads right into the next one. Whereas, right now we're going episodic on Doctor Who. It's like, here's a standalone story. Maybe sometimes there will be a 2-parter, but that's pretty much it. So they could even do that here. It's like maybe the TV movie will lead into another one, or maybe it won't. This one didn't.
Yeah.
This one didn't lead anywhere. It just sort of, I don't know, it kept everything consistent still with the classic series. Like, well, it's just the Doctor's going off to another adventure.
Yeah.
Wherever that is. I wrote down the Eye of Harmony. First off, I like seeing more inside of the TARDIS. Like, we said, the main room around the console, like, that entire set was completely, revamped to be different. It's like he's got a library, he's got a record player, everything's, all nice and good. And then, not only that, but we went further into the TARDIS, into many other rooms, even going to, I guess, what would be the heart of the TARDIS. He says, like, this is where all the power comes from. It's like, cool, I'll add that to the list of things that give it power. I wish I had been keeping a list, because this should be like the 5th or 6th thing.
Yeah.
That
strangely enough, though, that kind of follows along with the literally the evolution of science fiction. If you look back in the 50s and 60s, even going with Star Trek, the original Star Trek, very modern, very sleek, then as we actually get up into space and we start building the International Space Station, we do all that sort of stuff, you start to realize, but if you're going to be in space for years, then that kind of sterility is just going to drive you nuts. So then when you start seeing films like Alien, where it's really just it's a freighter, and it's ugly and it smells bad, and it's got stuff dripping off the walls, and it's got mold and little space rats and stuff like that. I think they began to realize that if you're going to be going through time and space for thousands of years, that you are going to start making it more livable. So I think by the 90s they said, if the Doctor is still flying through space after all this time, then he's probably going to say, I'd like a library. I'd like to pick up first edition of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
Right.
And that sort of thing. I noticed that at one point they used a compact disc for something. So, the Puccini and all that sort of stuff. So it all evolves.
Right.
With the taste of the audience at that time.
And I will say, because it's nice to think of like a starship as being like, this is where you live. If you're gallivanting across the cosmos, like, you need a place that's nice, you can live in, and it's all nice and good. I feel like maybe one of the first attempts at doing that was the Millennium Falcon. I feel like that was one of the first ships where, and I don't know, maybe it's not, but it's like that is a ship where it's like, even though unless we're talking about the version of the Falcon in Solo, it can be a pretty, grimy looking place, but it's like, it does look like, you could live in there if you cleaned it up every once in a while, which I guess Han doesn't. Yeah. But it's like, if you cleaned it up, it's like, no, this is a livable place. Here's a table, you can play holographic chess and stuff like that. There's a kitchen down there, and it's like, it's nice, it's livable. And so, I do like that about the TARDIS, because otherwise it's like, the TARDIS never really seems livable in the one I've seen in New Doctor Who, where it's different again from this. They took out the whole library stuff. It basically is just sort of the layout from the classic episodes, but it's not, completely white like in those episodes that we saw. So it's like, it is nice. And even in those classic episodes, like, the only time Well, okay, we saw some of it in the Hartnell episodes that we watch, and it's like we saw inside. It's like, yeah, there's a machine over there that will give you food cubes, and it's like, can I sit down anywhere? It's like, yeah, there's a rocking chair over there. Don't sit there though; it's the doctor's. And it's like, all right, what do you do to pass the time? Is it, he just sits in here? It's like, great place to live, and it's like, especially in those episodes, it's like, well, you can't really just go hang outside. He parked the TARDIS in a junkyard. It's like, so I do like that. I do like the redesign, and I like that we saw the Gothic cathedral at the heart of the TARDIS where he keeps the Eye of Harmony. So that's interesting.
There was another film right about the time that Star Wars came in, if I recall correctly, it was called Silent Running, that again had that very same sort of, this is a livable, we're spending years in space, so let's make it at least something that you could tolerate living in, and not just that completely sterile atmosphere.
Yeah, because that maybe I could see. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. The original design of the Enterprise, which I mean, it's also hard to judge that because it doesn't match up necessarily with the other shows and stuff because of how old it was. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, that doesn't seem like a place where you would like live. It looks like a place where you would work, and it's like it does look like a functioning, military ship. But it's like, but that's about it. It's not. Yeah. Doesn't look like a great place to live. Okay, we didn't exactly get an explanation of this. I don't think the Doctor was half human.
Never heard that before.
I've never heard that since. So, and he kind of made the joke to the one guy. It's like, I'm half human on my mother's side, and it's like, but did he just say that because he was trying to distract him and get the card? It's like they never really explain that. Now maybe the most they said, because I think when the Master was like, they were at the Eye of Harmony and they were looking at the projection of the Doctor's new body, he said, oh, he's half human. So is it specifically that this body is half human? Or, I don't know, maybe it's something we missed. Maybe you guys can tell us in the comments, but I don't know. I don't know what that was about.
It may just be a red herring. Like you said, it may have just been something he said.
So. Maybe, but they brought that up a couple times, so I'm curious. And if he is half human, where? Like, it's like, where does that like come into play? It's like it looks at him as like he's half human. It's like he still has two hearts. He still seems to have the biology of a Gallifreyan. So it's like not sure where that comes into play.
Well. Again, I don't know if all Gallifreyans have two hearts, but it may be that he has two hearts because one of his hearts is Gallifreyan and one of his hearts is Terran. Not, what do they call it?
Oh yeah,
that Humanian era.
The Humanian era,
seriously,
or something like
that.
Come
on, Humanian. That was just.
I forgot about that.
I would have slapped somebody about that one. So get that off of there. The Earth has a name. We are Terrans, we are terrestrials, whatever you want to call it. We've used those names for hundreds of years now. So to call us just humans, like they did in Deep Space Nine, when the Ferengi call us humans.
Yeah, that was interesting, and I guess part of the half human thing was with the Eye of Harmony, because like I guess that's how you open the Eye of Harmony. Because the Doctor says, like, well, he was talking to the Master. It's like, how did you open it? And it's like, well, you're half human, and I have a human. And it's like, why is that specific that you need a human to open? And he couldn't even use a possessed Grace, because I guess when he possessed Grace, her eyes became more like his, which would be alien. So... yeah, it's like, why do you need to be part human or completely human to open the heart of the TARDIS? Because the TARDIS is not necessarily unique. I'm sure the insides are all, his design and stuff like that. But all Gallifreyans, all Time Lords use TARDISes. It's just that, they're like specifically like grown or something. And it's just that this TARDIS is very, specifically his, the insides are all his. He put in the library and stuff like that, and the outside, being the police box, that's all him because he just refuses to change it. So, yeah, it's like, why would this be designed to only work with a human? So, that's kind of my guess. Because we've also seen, like, in the Master's first appearance, he had a TARDIS. So, it's like, remember, like, the first thing we see in that episode, in Terror of the Autons, is just like this circus bus just appears out of nowhere. It's like, well, that's his TARDIS, and his chameleon circuit works. Yeah. So, I wrote down the future. He knows everyone's future, apparently. I guess it's because they're significant. It's like they're significant enough as, he talked to the one security guard, and he recognized who he was because he makes like huge advancements in the science of earthquakes and saves a lot of lives, and the Doctor knows that. But he also knows like a lot of Grace's future. He knows Lee's future, so I guess maybe Lee does something with his life. I mean, he's got all the gold. He could, if he, maybe he funds some research or something like that, or he becomes a scientist. Yeah. But it's like, it's interesting that they brought that up. Maybe that was because, they wanted to play up that he's a time traveler. Yeah. So, if they wanted to play that up to the new audience, like, yes, he is a time traveler, and it's like he's from the future and stuff, so he knows everyone's future, and it's like, okay, I guess you can go with that, but that seemed a little odd.
That also something that they were going to develop if this had gone into a series or even other films.
Right. Yeah, maybe that would have been it. I don't know. It just seems interesting because I was also thinking, last time in Remembrance, technically McCoy was doing the same thing because he knew about, Harry, and Harry was going to have kids and stuff like that. And so he mentioned that, but it's like, but he knew that because he knew those people. So I guess maybe it is just that these people, that security guard was significant. Grace will be significant, and so will Lee. So, I don't know. Just seemed interesting.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last thing I really wrote down was the Doctor versus the Master. This guy had to get physical. Like, this is probably more than any Doctor to this, up to this point. Like, he really had to pull out a couple moves to actually fight the Master, which was interesting.
You'll notice, though, that other than that one kick when he was trying to get out of the handcuffs, he really didn't fight. I mean, he was avoiding trying to fight.
Yeah, and it wasn't too much.
He did try to save the Master. When the Master got caught in the thing, he said, give me your hand. And
right.
But didn't ultimately end up saving him. So, I mean, he's non-violent. I think that did show through. But, that was somewhat out of character for him to do that.
Yeah, at least up to this point, I can't think of, maybe one of the other younger ones like Davison or Colin Baker, might do that kick to get out, but no one else would really have thought of that. Although, apparently people have told me that the third Doctor, John Pertwee, is kind of known for his karate moves. Like everyone's, which I guess makes sense, if he's working with a unit, he has to deal with, maybe even more hostile aliens than normal. But yeah, I don't know. That was just interesting. And then for the Master to he's just gone. And it's like, you would think there's no coming back from that, but I know he comes back. And not only that, so...
Remember, rule number 1 in science fiction, nobody ever dies in science fiction.
Yeah, but, okay, so the explanation is that, because technically if you go in continuity, then sometime after this movie is the Time War, and the explanation they give after all this is that the Time Lord specifically brought the Master back in order to fight in the Time War because they thought he would be a perfect warrior. He ended up running away because he didn't want to do it, and he basically fled to the end of the universe and regenerated into a child and took all his memories away for a while until the Doctor pretty much accidentally jogged his memory, and then we had him at the end of series 3. But my question is, how did the Time Lords get him then? because he seemed to like disintegrate at the end there, and if he's disintegrated, I don't know how you can come back from that. And also the fact that he seems like he would be trapped in the Eye of Harmony at the center of the TARDIS. Like, why? How did the Time Lords get him? Unless there's more to that they could explain. It's like, well, the Eye of Harmony. It's like, well, it's like tied to the big thing on Gallifrey that lets all the time travel happen, so they can go in at Gallifrey and take what's left of the Master from him without him even knowing about it.
We've discussed this before, like with the TV series with Flash. How Flash goes back to do something, and then when he realizes it's wrong, he then goes back again as another and tries to stop himself from doing it. And Marty McFly and Doc Brown in Back to the Future, when they realize that the timeline has changed, they realize that they have to go back before that, and so there's two Marty McFlys back in 1955, and he's trying not to let his other self see him, the original one. So I mean, that's one of the things that authors love to play with when you're talking about time travel. Is do you have the capacity that if you have traveled back in time and then you come forward in time, do you then have the ability to go back in time while you were still back in time in order to stop yourself or to help yourself do something back in time? So, who knows? It just gets more and more confusing.
Yeah, which you could argue they somewhat did here because, when they were counting down to the new year, they were able to jumpstart the TARDIS, go back in time, fix everything, and then go forward in time, and nothing was destroyed. So technically, it is sort of like that. If they had gone back in time and just sort of waited it out, instead they did use the TARDIS to go forward in time till after that. But they could have just waited there, and as they were waiting there and making sure everything was fine, there was another TARDIS there that was having to, that was going through all that stuff they just went through. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure there's, audio dramas and stuff that explain how exactly they were able to revive the Master and stuff like that. So, it's interesting. He's definitely a very interesting villain to have for Doctor Who, especially because, when you think of the other two big villains, technically three, the Cybermen, the Daleks, and then occasionally when they bring back Davros, they just seem to be these, forces of evil, and they're, incredibly mechanical. You really don't see, other than Davros, you don't see any sort of flesh left in them, unless, they even cut open a Dalek, but that's rare that they can do that. Yeah. So it's interesting to have a character like the Master, where it's like he is basically just if the Doctor went bad. If he had, one, like the Joker says, like if you're one bad day away from becoming me, basically. Yeah. So it's interesting, and he definitely worked for this movie to try to bring in a new audience, I think. So yeah, I really enjoyed this movie.
Yep,
it was really good. And
as they would have said in the 90s, 2 thumbs up.
All right.
You never watched Ebert and Siskel.
Oh, okay. Now I gotcha. Yeah, that is pretty much that. You got anything else to say?
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Again, for what it was quite enjoyable. So
it kind of makes me sad that this is all, at least in terms of, a movie or a show, this is all that Paul McGann got. He's come back for a lot of audio dramas and stuff like that to really do more with the Eighth Doctor, but it's like, yeah, this is all for him on screen basically. And it's like, well, that kind of sucks, but for what we got, it was really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna be a while before we get back to classic Doctor Who, and it's not even gonna be with any of these 8. It's gonna be with Peter Cushing. So yeah. But we'll see you guys there. That's pretty much it. With all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of our Doctor Who classic reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.